everyone. Thank you for deciding to spend your wonderful Friday evening with me. Unfortunately, you're stuck with me for the next 30 minutes, but my hope is that, there is something that you can take away as inspiration from this 30-minute discussion. Um, Today, we're going to talk about a unique trait for a product manager. And you might wonder, like, what is this timelessness? I've never heard of this word. And even if you've heard this word, it sounds a bit quirky. All I'm going to do in the next 20, 30 minutes is to break down this word for every one of us and then explain how contextual and it's important for us as PMs to look at this and pick this up and then move forward in our career using this. Um, my hope is that, there is at least one takeaway for each one of us on this call. So let's start with an interesting one, right? So what is the population of Singapore? I know this crowd is quiet, so if you want to just, type in something in the chat, take a guess. Anyone? Bingo. So I think we got the first one as the right one, Karthik. So it's 5 million. And we'll look at in a minute why this 5 million is relevant for us. And if you want to scale it down and then look at any other city, for example, the city of Kochi is also like 5 million. Now, the 5 million is what we are going to focus on. And the reason is if you go to LinkedIn today and then type in product manager, you will get about 5 million people all around the world. So there are about 5 million people who currently have their titles set up to be product managers. This may be an underestimate given the fact that not everyone has their title as product manager. But the point is there are 5 million of us, who have product management as our titles. And there are many more who are aspiring to become a product manager. But the unique thing about this product management is that, there is no degree, right? So there was an estimate that was done a few years ago where it was discovered that only 5% of product managers have a very direct and a formal education in product management. Now that's interesting because, when you want to work on cars, for the most part, you study mechanical engineering, right? So software engineering may be a little bit of a mixed bag, but there as well, you for sure have the field of software engineering that you study for or IT. But all of that, for the most part, is not applicable to product management. Now we start with 5 million, and then we said that only a few of us have very direct education on it. And the reason why I think it's very important to call out and highlight that fact is because you and I, for the most part, will be making very important decisions for the companies. Things like what to build, how to build, who to focus on, how to get more revenue, how to activate more users. These are very important business decisions that we make on behalf of the company. Think about it. Now, when you do this, this is a PM job. When you do this, something along the way will come and, hit you, right? So it will try to make you a little more ambivalent. So the meaning of ambivalence is something like, you have some sort of a dual intent, right? So you don't know which one to pick and go against. And for us as product managers, one of the most evident ways we face this is how it is described here in the pictorial form in front of us. So you have the business or the company that you work for, and then you have the customer that you have to serve. So you as a product manager have this struggle, or you're in between both of these entities, a business and a customer, trying to figure out how to balance both of these things so that you can create a winning situation for everyone in this ecosystem, be it you, the business or the company, or the customer. But you always have this tension in spite of repeatedly hearing the term that customer is key, listen to the customer comes always first. But I'm certain, and I guarantee you, at some point in your career, in many of the projects that you work on, you'll be faced with this. Who and what to prioritize? Is it the customer or the company that I should be prioritizing in this context? Now, many of you are thinking, okay, so I get it a little bit, but can you show me an example? There's no better way to explain this with an example other than the one that you're seeing on the screen. I think this one, many of us can resonate with because we've all experienced this, right? So you get a newspaper, and then once you get it, you're just facing an ad page. Not just on the front side, but also on the back side. In this case, the company, or even let's say the product manager, has chosen to prioritize the ad revenue over the customer experience and the needs, which is, really for the customer to see the headline, but in this case, it's not happening. Now, to get it back to our PM context, it becomes even more worse when you see the paycheck, right? So it comes from your company. The customer doesn't pay your bank account, right? So they pay the company's bank account. So you have this emotional tension attached to the business, but at the end of the day, your job calls you to work for the customer. Now, my desire, like I said, is to just make you excel as a PM, right, in adapting to some sort of a new mindset. We look at what that mindset is. So it's all about, discovering something, adapting to it, and then enhancing to it. And the key part here is to benefit the customer so that the customer can propel the business forward. So you got to repeat, rinse this whole process so that, you keep thinking about the customer, which is what you would hear typically everywhere that you look around. But that is very key, and there's no going away from it. So it's more of a mindset shift, I would say. And we can also look at some ways that we can embrace this mindset shift. But at the core of it, it's a mindset shift. Now, we looked at the tension that we started off with between us being product managers trying to do something for the business or for the customer. But what I'm here to say today is, always look in a one-way street or through a one-way street and then focus on the customer because it's a vicious cycle. So once you uplift your customer and then make them believe in your product or do something good, which is what we are called for to do, the customer will uplift the business and everything else will be taken care of naturally. So that's what timelessness is getting tied into. So you are getting yourself as a product manager into this vicious cycle with this new mindset so that you constantly go through the motions of doing these three things repeatedly and at the end of the day serve the customer so that everything comes back to you as a PM. So PMing mindset, in my opinion, should not be a straight line. It should not be something like planning, building, and shipping. It's actually a circle or an infinite loop in many ways. So it should be something like you plan and then you plan and then you build and then you just have some sort of a escape has hatch to just do some delivery offshoots, but at the end of the day you're always in this planning mindset so that you can constantly be looking out for what should we do for the customer, how can we just uplift them so that we can just take one better step at a time. And quite frankly, also in this day and age, product development should not be done. Things are very dynamic and changing, right? Customer needs change, customer taste changes, the technology changes by many fold. Ultimately, good PMs understand this and then they instill this sort of a behavior within themselves. So now you might be thinking, I get it. Like, how do I do it? Right. So in theory, it sounds good. And many of you might have already heard this term that, keep the customer first. But how do I do it? So if you're ready, here comes the juicy part. So I'm going to give you like three strategies that we can all use as PMs to exhibit this trait, and at the end of the day, serve our customers better. So it's just going to be three strategies. The first one is to have this notion of creating or prioritizing outcome over output. These are very distinct terms. At the surface level, they might look the same. Outcome, output, you might think it's the same, but underneath them, they have real different meanings behind them. So rather than obsessing with outputs, and GST is a very common thing that we're all used to. Get stuff done, completing the task, be done with it. Rather than having that mindset, which is purely a output focused mindset, how can we distill or instill some sort of an outcome-based approach where we always look out for something which is the end state for someone in the equation? It could be the customer in this case. So let's take a real example. Imagine you're tasked to build a mobile app or redesign a mobile fitness app in this case. If you look at this from an output context, then it would sound like this. I'm going to read this to you. The product team released a new feature for the mobile fitness app that allows users to track their daily water intake. This feature includes a very friendly interface. It had the option to set up reminders, and it also had like weekly reports on hydration levels. Now, there's nothing wrong with it. You were tasked to do the redesign or development of the mobile app, which is what we did. And here we are reading what we did. So this is the output. Now, let's just look at how an outcome of the same initiative can look like. If you look at it from the outcome standpoint, something like this should read. Again, I'm going to read it, what is written on the screen, word to word. After implementing the water tracking feature, the app sees a 25% increase in daily active users. Additionally, user feedback indicates that they're full, they're more hydrated, and then, of course, the retention rate of the app increased by X%. Now, when we look at this, it might look simple, right? So you might think, why are we not doing this? And isn't this what we're supposed to do? But many times, what I've observed is that we constantly put ourselves in the output mindset, and we forget about what we are called to do, which is to focus on the outcome. Now, I guarantee you that, if we start making one small change at a time to keep focusing on outcome, there's going to be tremendous change in the entire ecosystem. So the outcome is the measurable impact or the benefit that resulted in the output, right? So you got to do the output to achieve the outcome for sure. So, but you're just looking at things from a different perspective. So it's not about just delivering the feature, right? So, or the output. It's about how the feature impacted positively or negatively. And how do you define the overall success metric here? So hopefully this gives a very stark distinction between what an output and an outcome-based approach looks like. But it's, of course, easier said than done, right? So like we discussed, so it's very easy to look at it and then say, yes, isn't this what you're supposed to do? But it's pretty hard if you look at it. Now it becomes even more harder when you are tasked with something to do, right? Many of us are junior PMs. You'll be like given something to do. So what do you do? How do you develop this whole mindset shift? Or how do you employ this strategy? I would say, we're all growing, right? Be it in our careers or in our lives. So you can basically, navigate this problem by asking 5 questions. Remember, it's a mindset shift. It's not going to happen the next day. So you just have to think about taking the baby steps, so that you get to the entire shift at some point. But start small is what I would say. There are 5 questions. One is, what value are we creating for the customer? So you as a PM, when you're given a task, you are empowered to ask questions. In fact, that's one of the important things that, we as PMs have to do for sure. Ask questions, poke the assumptions, can we find any holes? How should we plug with more metrics? These are very important things that we have to take care of in our daily jobs. And this question quite aligns with that, right? So it's as simple as asking, what value are you creating for the customer or the business? So I would just throw a word of caution here. Let's not be jerks here, right? So we're all here to learn. I don't know everything, right? So it's best to frame these questions, even though these are questions, it's best to frame these questions in a way that it spurs a dialogue. We don't want to just come in and then throw questions for the sake of throwing questions, but I hope this message comes across well that we want to raise a dialogue so that we create awareness and then move everyone forward together with us. So that's the first question. Second question could be something like, what is the measure of success? So in many companies that you might work, you might have some methodology that you're following, like OKR, some other type of unique operating plan that you're following. But always go back to this question of what is the measure of success? Now, the reason why you want to look at the measure of success is that it it pretty much at the end of the day would be tied to something that is business oriented. So when you are aligned on the business metric, or when you try to align everyone on the business metric, many of the other things naturally fall in place. So that's the second one. The third one is who's the target audience or customer. The fourth one is what are different possible solutions we have considered. Now, this may be applicable in some situations, maybe not, but I've seen this happen in places where there is a direct enforcement coming top down. So top down is good and bad, but in many cases it's bad. The reason is, there's some sort of a bias in it, right? So when you're told what to do when it comes from top down, many times, people at the top don't have context into the lateral view, right? That you as a PM would have. You might be much more closer to the product development, so you know the ins and outs of what is possible versus not. The ground reality is much more prevalent at our layer compared to, something that's coming up from up top. And the next one is why is the chosen outcome important? But remember that choosing the wrong outcome at the end of the day leads to wrong or bad results. So choosing this outcome, is very important. So you can use these questions to just slowly navigate in the direction of focusing yourself into an outcome-based PM versus being an output-based, even in cases where you're tasked to do something. But I would say though, as you mature in your role, you will become good negotiators, trying to co-create the outcome. And also, I would say the best leaders set the stage for this to happen for every PM. So more examples, we look at the mobile fitness app. There are other examples where you can sort of tease out the output and outcome. Just one quick example is let's say healthcare. Rather than focusing on the number of patients seen by a doctor, you can focus on the end outcome, right? So in this case, the patient is the customer. So what is the overall improvement in the patient's life or the quality of life or care? So that's something that we can focus on as an outcome. So that's outcome, having the focusing on a strategy as outcome versus output so that, you can get back to that cycle of viciousness to just keep propelling the customer forward. The second strategy is talk to the customers regularly. Um, so it's not talk to customers, it's talk to customers regularly. So there's an underscore or an highlight on the word regularly. The reason why regularly is important is because many times we become complacent, right? So we just do a user interview and then we're like, okay, so I got the best insights from the customer and I'm going to just build it. Now, what happens next, right? So there's no feedback loop at all, right? You might measure some metrics. Is that good enough? But in the spirit of being eternal, I would say, something has to happen regularly. And this by far is one of those most important things that'll keep you very much up to date on what is the need of the hour and whether you're able to meet it or not. So talking to the customer regularly is very important. Now, here as well, so we need to interview with the goal of asking what their needs are. So we don't need to ask customers, what should I build for you? Because that's a different question, and that's not what we should be asking. We should be asking things like, have you used the product? Do you have any feedback, or what do you face with? Like, what are your challenges? So you go with this open mindset of asking questions genuinely so that you understand the customer better and then try to get out what they need at the end of the hour rather than trying to get to what they want us to build. So it's one of those important things that we all have biases and we need to recognize that, especially in the context of interviewing. um, confirmation bias is real, right? So I'll give you an example of what confirmation bias is. So imagine you're developing a new feature for your product, right? And you're getting feedback from a few users. You believe this feature will be a game changer because as PMs, that's what we are entitled to, believe in. As you gather more feedback, you tend to pay more attention to the comments that support your belief, right? And then you overlook or dismiss even sometimes some of the feedback that challenges your belief. So you are building a product and you think it's a game-changing product. That's your belief. And now when you get feedback, there are few pieces of feedback that support it, pieces of feedback that don't support it. Now, what in the case of confirmation bias means is that you just leave out the feedback that challenges you, but then you just look at feedback that supports your belief. So this tendency is called confirmation bias. For a product manager, it's essential to be aware of this bias, really important, because it can lead to making decisions based on incomplete or more importantly skewed information. So it's crucial to approach feedback and data objectively, ensuring that decisions are well-rounded at the end of the day. So one tip that you can deploy to not get into this trap is to take turns so that it's not just you. You can tap into your network, right? So you have your engineer who's working on it, working on the product. You have your other functions like functions from the operations team, customer success. So try to tap into that network within the company so that you get interviews done and then you try to eliminate as much bias as possible in that process. Once you do the interview, it's important to synthesize. It's one thing is to just say that you're constantly doing interviews, write a bunch of notes. But one thing to say is you do an interview and then you synthesize it. Because the most important thing and the point of doing interviews is to, distill the takeaways and of course make it recurring. So there are two things that happen when you do this user interviews. One is you sort of build a space where you start collecting an inventory of opportunities. And these opportunities are not something that you created, right? So you co-created at the end of the day working with the actual user of the product, which is very important because imagine the success that you would get when you build these products because you already have a user in front of you to use this product. That's the benefit of it. The second thing is your assumptions are also validated. Like I said, so as product managers, we have preconceived notions of our customers. We assume that certain things would work for them. But if you take really a closer look at the user interview and then do it well without confirmation biases, so your assumptions are going to get valid or validated. So that's the second strategy, right? So talking to the customers regularly. The third and final one is being analytical. Now, what does analytical mean, right? So analytical means something like you measure and you monitor. And of course, it doesn't stop there. You got to synthesize the data, which means you got to analyze the data. So being analytical means having the ability to examine and understand things in a much more detailed and systematic way. So it could involve things like breaking down complex information or raw data into smaller parts to gain understanding. So try to leverage, all of these new and cool tools that we have at our disposal today. This is the best time to be a PM, in fact, because you have a lot more tools at your disposal, which are very minimal in cost, right? So you have much more advanced machine learning supported tools. So you don't have to spend months or even days looking at raw data trying to gain any insight. You might all know that if you go to a Google Sheet or even Excel, even if you highlight a couple of columns, Excel would automatically give you the smart analysis done for you. So there's nothing that should be stopping us from getting started on this. But the key here is it's not again a linear operation. So we want to measure, we want to monitor, of course, because one thing is to say, I'm going to measure, you're going to instrument your product. But after it ships, if you're not looking at it regularly, it just defeats the whole point. And of course, once you look at it, you got to analyze it. One tip that I would give here and that has worked very well for me is to set up repeated invites in my calendar so that I keep tab on the metrics, right? So and then I have my time carved out to look at what happened or what is happening because of something that happened in the past. Meaning, you might have released a product in the past, but sitting in the future or today, you can look at what happened as a result of it. And it's very important to look at it so that that will help you inform future decisions, especially when you tie it with the customer feedback or the interview that we discussed as a strategy too. This goes well. And this again, so on theory, it might look good. You'll say it's easier than said than done. But what I would say is always look up to the business metric or the outcome, and then everything should fall in place for you. One word of caution is that sometimes we get pretty much excited to measure something, and then we might get into this analysis paralysis mode where you try to measure everything. There's a plethora of metrics in front of you. You don't know which one to focus on, so be careful on that. Other extension to that is that, few things are going to be very easy to measure, right? So with the tools that you have, it should be pretty easy to measure something like daily actives, monthly actives, right? So it's pretty easy. But many things, that you develop for will be very, very hard to measure. Think about this, right? How are you going to measure customer happiness? Your boss or CEO will come and say, we built this product. Are customer happy? Is the customer happy? Are people using it and are they happy about it? Now, the straightforward answer is to turn back and say, I'm going to do NPS. NPS, it can get you only so far, but really to measure customer happiness, there are other ways that you have to think about as a product manager to measure. One thing that has helped me tremendously in addressing these type of hard to measure contexts is to identify proxy metrics. So when you identify a proxy metric, it's easy to measure the proxy metric and easy to reason with that proxy metric and answer the question that is at the top, which is in this case, how do you measure customer happiness? I'm not going to get into the details of proxy metrics, but I would highly encourage you all to go and read this Gibson's article. So in this article, Gibson really does provide a very well written narrative on why we need proxy metrics, and even he gives examples of how he picked out proxy metrics working at Netflix. So those are the three strategies. So the outcome always is important over output. The next one is talk to your customers repeatedly or regularly, and then be analytical and try to measure the hard things because people shy away sometimes from measuring things that are hard, but it's those measurements that will help you really understand the customer and then help you move forward. So remember what we started off with, right? So we started off saying that we always have this tension, and we sort of looked at a way to get ourselves out of the tension mode to just focus on one thing, which is the customer, using three strategies that we discussed. And my hope is that, this gives you a sense of what timelessness is, and what that brings to the table for a PM. Hopefully, this gives you something to walk away from that we can start deploying in our PM job starting tomorrow. And that concludes what I wanted to share with you. And once again, thank you for spending your Friday evening with me. Back to you, Kushal.
Thanks, Sam. I would say I had a few takeaways myself from today's talk. Um, Folks, we have now time for questions. So you can either unmute yourself or drop in your questions on the chat in the chat box, and we'll answer them. And yeah, until we have we've got about time, 10-15 minutes, so we can answer any questions you might have. So please feel free to unmute yourself, drop in your questions, or you can drop them in the chat as well, and we'll take some time to answer them. Thanks, Vivek, Saurabh. I think we have quite an enlightened crowd today. All right, we have a question from Abhishek. How do you set the right metrics? Sam, do you want to take a shot at it?
Yeah, sure. So what I've done in the past and what I'm doing now that helps with that question is break down metrics
Sam,
into
you seem
three.
to be. I'm not sure
Can
if
you hear
it's
me?
the internet. Oh, okay. My internet is a little unstable. Please go on, Sam.
Okay, cool. So what I've experienced working for me personally, Abhishek, is that starting with the business metric is gonna set the right stage for us. So I'll give you some very concrete example. Let's imagine, a very concrete business problem. Most likely, once you get mature, the problem comes here with the churn, right? So you got to focus on retention, reduce churn is a real business problem that many of us face. Now, you as a product manager, in many ways, can influence the metric of churn or retention, but most often it's going to be indirectly influenced. I'm not going to have a very direct control of retention or churn, but I might have a very indirect control of it. Now, then, once you align on the business metric to focus on, which in this case is retention, let's say, then you look at the product metrics from that angle. Then for retention, what are some things that you have to do? So for retention, maybe, people have to do X things in your product. That is a leading signal, for retention. So then you carve out the metrics for that. Now, it doesn't stop there, right? So that's just a leading metric. Maybe that's an aggregated metric. Then you have like so many features in the product. So you got to have like these feature metrics that tie back to the product metric, which in turn ties back to the business metric. So what I've seen really work well is um, developing a tree, metrics tree, starting with the business metric, tied down to the product metric and the feature metric, so that you have a tree to focus on, which is not contradictory at the end of the day, but everything is aligned towards what you want to get out of this product. So writing it down and then really, looking at it helps define the metric first, and then you can, find opportunities to optimize each one of these things. So many times where we get stuck is not being able to draw a direct relationship between what we are responsible for, maybe let's a feature, and then tying it back to a business metric. So if we get that right, I think we'll all get the metrics part easily figured out. There's one more question on how to improve one's product sense. I think it goes back to the point around there's no formal degree that we looked at. So it's all about, improving by looking at things around us. So it could be, you know, when I look at a product, let's say Swiggy. So you're a Swiggy user at the end of the day. You also are a product manager at the end of the day. So you just put both these hats on and then see what can you take away from this product, right? So what is if there's a new notification or a new feature, how are they introducing it? Is it causing delight to the customer or is it not causing delight? So what would you do better? So just have the constant thought going in the back of your mind, looking at everyday things around you, and I think that will make you a better PM. And of course, you got to learn yourself by looking at others, following people on Twitter or LinkedIn. All of that matters, but there's close one-on-one thing that you can do by yourself, right? So looking at things that you use every day and then trying to tease out things from that. So that has helped a lot, especially for me. In when you're a user and when you're a PM at the same time, what are things that you can take away by looking at it? And of course, learning from the others by following people on Twitter and LinkedIn helps as well. So the next question is, when you mention talk regularly with the end user, do you mean you need to implement, let's say, a X feature with user earlier expected, measure, and then go back to the end user, or is there an intermittent way to go about it? Because in an agile ecosystem, there is a sprint level effort that goes into development and a lot of cost is involved. Is there any way to optimize delivery, pre-delivery? Yeah, that's right. So we as PMs are constantly bound to execution cycle, right? So one of the interesting things about PMing is that you live in three worlds. You live in a world of the past, you live in a past of the world of the current, and then you live in a world of the future. So what I mean by that is, you would have developed something released, right? So you'll be looking at the metrics for it. That's why you're living in the past. Now there is this team in front of you which is actively building products, based on your requirements. So that's living in the present. You also live in the future because you got to look at what the customer needs are so that, come next sprint, you already have things ready for the team to work on. It is a hard job, but in the context of this question, what I would say is I would just keep the user interviews away from this execution cycle so that you're not completely tied down to this user interview fueling your next sprint or your current sprint work, but rather take it and run it in a separate cycle, right? So we should be able to spend like 30 minutes a week or bi-weekly 30 minutes, set it up as a separate independent process for yourself to talk to the customer, get feedback, and then build your own opportunity inventory. So this can be a totally independent thing outside the context of execution.
Folks, any more questions? All right, we have one. Taking continuous discover, adapt, and enhance into consideration when to retire a product, feature, or entire product. Great question, Mani.
Yeah, so your metrics will tell you, right? So if there are no users, and if users think that we are stuck, sucking up the time, not providing any value,
Hmm.
if you do the metrics right, so there should be a lot of leading indicators, that provide a good signal into this context. And also, my hope is that we don't think about retirement, right? So we think about enhancing and making it better. Maybe it means that it's retiring one thing. I don't know. It's context dependent. But if we go in this cycle, then you just keep enhancing the product. So the new avatar of the product just forms as you user interviews, measure, talk to the customer. So your leading indicators, measures are the indicators, I would say, in making these key decisions. How do you work on a complete new product? How to structure your plan to go down the right path of development and processes and so on. I don't know if you've heard this term, but I came across this recently. I think it was from Albert Einstein, which said, when I do something, I plan 90% of the time, and then 10% of the time I work on it. Don't quote exactly on don't quote me exactly on this, but I think the point to take away is that planning, talking to customers is key before building a product. And what has helped me personally is writing a lot. So that's an important skill that I would encourage all of us to develop. um, Imagine this, right? So you get into a meeting and there are, like, let's say five or 10 people. I can guarantee that, not everyone is paying attention to every single word that, you're speaking in that meeting. But writing is different. So you can just put things on paper. It gives you two things. One is it makes you feel confident that, you have done the job, right? Because you can't write a full page of paper without doing enough research, right? So otherwise it's garbage. So you will get that self-realization when you write. That's one benefit. The other benefit is that you also can talk to other people without talking to them. So you can send a document, you can tag people and say, hey, can you review this or read through this before the meeting, share your thoughts. That helps, in a way to just, be prepared and also do the right thing. So hopefully that helps that, bottom line is planning, and a lot of planning before you even get started on anything. Yeah, and of course, like Kushal said, questions are important. We ask the questions along the way.
The question you should.
Anytime, Abhishek. You can actually draw more questions if you have. Cool. I think I would, we have time, folks. We can a couple of questions. So we can probably even talk about specific challenges you might be facing as product managers, or if you're aspiring PMs, right? Questions on how to, like, if you have any or clarifications you need in what the path looks like for a product manager, we're happy to help answer. Cool. I think we are good with questions today, Sam. Again, hey everyone, I'd like to thank everyone to join us today on. Okay, your question. Thanks, Arvind. As an aspiring PM, do SDA skills and latest tech skills, MLAI, I'm assuming, would these skills be relevant or necessary for uh, being a PM? I'll probably take a shot at it. Sure. Thanks for clarifying. So, yes, I would say if you're building, since most of the product management role is for software products, and you're working with engineers along with designers, and what my take is, if you have a software uh, development background or education, it's a plus, but it is not a necessity. You need not be a software engineer or know how code, or rather have done active coding in the past to become a product manager. A product manager is a very multi-faceted, I would say, role, of which technical understanding is one part of it. If you are an SD in the past, it helps to have conversations with your development and tech teams wherever you're working. The double-edged sword is that you then look at every solution from a technical point of view more if you're not careful enough. So I would say it depends in the long in the short, and it's good technical understanding though. And with the latest tech skills, ML and AI depends on whether you're building ML and AI products or if you want to use ML and AI in product management function, right? They're totally different questions. It's good to understand common productivity tools, AI tools, like how to use them, how to maximize output. GPT, for example, or Mid-Journey, for example, right? Although use it as a way to improve your productivity overall, improve output for yourself in that role. If you're working on ML and AI product, it is necessary for you to know the fundamentals of these technologies, though. No worries. How much mandatory use or useful is it to know domain knowledge for an aspiring PM? For example, Twin Health, okay, I think, Sam, you could take a shot at this one.
Sure. For example, in Twin Health, do we need to know about healthcare basics? So I'll tell you this. So I'm the least qualified person in the Twin product team to talk about healthcare. So that hopefully explains or answers your question. But having said that, I would say it's a yes or no, and it depends really on the role. My take on this is that it's better to be a generalist so that you have a wide variety of things in front of you that you can focus on. But really depends on the role and what the company is looking for. Um, I'll give you an example. When you look at PMing at let's say a platform level, right? So then really the domain expertise is required or mandatory. But if you look at building something like a customer facing product or initiative, it may or may not be required. So it depends on the context, I would say. And my take on this one personally is that, it's better to be a generalist rather than, getting very hung up on a particular domain. So that opens up a lot of opportunities for you. Even in this case, let's say you get hired into a company. If you're a generalist, you can just move, between departments or roles or product lines. So it just gives you a breadth of things to explore. Of course, you'll master the fundamentals, but from a domain knowledge, I think it's a hit or miss, and it depends on the context.
Thanks for sharing that, Priya. Cool, folks. All right, with this, we end today's star session. Thanks, Sam. It was a wonderful, or rather, it was quite an insightful session. And I myself had a few takeaways. I'm pretty sure, folks, you would have some new learnings from today's session as well. Thanks for joining in on a Friday evening. Really appreciate it. This recording will go onto our YouTube and LinkedIn channels, so you can access them at any time in the future, or you can share it with your friends who you might think who you think can benefit from it. Talking a little bit about PM School and the live cohort program. So we are starting our next live cohort program in 3 weeks. Priyal has reached out with I would say, a sign up form. In case you're interested, please do share your details on pmschool.io, and Priyal and or someone from our team can reach out to you to answer any questions you might have. This is an 8-week boot camp covering all the basics required for you to crack product manager interviews and understand the fundamentals of the product management role, including special sessions on B2B product management and AI for PMs as well. So if you're interested, please check out our LinkedIn and website and just drop in your details. Thanks again, Sam. And folks, have a great rest of the weekend, and hope to connect with you very soon. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Sam. Bye.